His name in Mongolian is Sigaragchagin Byambasarin. His name in English means the Rising Dragon. But from this point forward, Hoshoryu Tomokatsu is the 74th Yokozuna in the history of sumo. We'll talk about it today on the New to Sumo podcast.
Let's start the show. New to sumo, here we go.
Before we begin, let me just start by apologizing to Hoshoryu in case I butchered his Mongolian name. When we ended our last video just a couple of days ago, it didn't occur to us while we were recording it to maybe check to see how long it usually takes for a Yokozuna promotion meeting to be held. We thought that it would take us like a couple of weeks, maybe even a whole month until such a decision was made. No, it only took them a few hours, really. And, lo and behold, as soon as we finished that one, we were like, well, looks like we need to be ready to record again because this thing could be happening within a few hours. And sure enough, it only took about a day or so for Hoshoryu to be recommended for Yokozuna promotion.
Yeah, and it certainly was a very quick turnaround, but there was also enough time for tons and tons of people to get involved in the comments and on social media and all over the place with their opinions on what should be done. And I'd say overwhelmingly, people felt that promoting Hoshoryu to Yokozuna was the right move in the right moment. But there were some really interesting perspectives on both sides about why it may or may not have been the right decision. Ultimately, that's the decision that was made, and I'm super excited for Hoshoryu. I think he's done a lot of really amazing work. Maybe one of the biggest factors that sold it for me was the three straight wins in the final moments of the tournament. I think that's just showing a really incredible amount of heart and desire, and just power to do that on the final day of the tournament. But obviously, there were a lot of interesting and really practical perspectives on why it wasn't the traditional historical decision to promote someone under those circumstances. People cited the fact that he, lost several matches to Maegashira and often does, and that being something that as a Yokozuna you would be hoping to see happening a lot less. And a lot of people who said that it wasn't the right decision to promote Hoshoryu felt that it was really just a matter of time and whether or not he was ready in this moment. Not that he's not a great wrestler, because of course Hoshoryu is a fantastic wrestler, probably the most consistent, top division wrestler we have, with not a single losing record in the last 3 years. Is that right?
Yeah, you have to go all the way back to the end of 2021 to find the last time that he had a losing record. And, since 2022, he's had, five, six, seven, eight, nine, 10. He's had 11 uh records with double digit wins, since January of 2022. So by far the most consistent wrestler, and you can't even really count our own now ex Yokozuna in that list because he was just injured so often. By contrast, Hoshoryu, he is just never hurt. And, when he does get hurt, he kind of waits until, he's very satisfied with his record before bowing out, like he did twice last year. But I think the perspective from the Yokozuna Deliberation Council is he has proven that he is clutch, that when the situation calls for it, he will step up, and win that U show. He did it in that crazy July 2023 tournament, and he did it this past weekend, and he was inches away from doing it back in November. So I can totally see the side of the argument where, yeah, now is the right time. Did he get a little bit of a boost from there being no Yokozuna on the risk of there being no Yokozuna on the next Banzuke? I don't think that any reasonable person can discount that as a factor. Like the Yokozuna is to sumo, what like the president is to the United States. Like he represents the entire sport, and you can't really, market yourself with a bunch of guys that don't have the big white rope.
Yeah, I think it's important. I also think that one of the the things when it comes to sports for me, I've probably made this point in previous videos, but I always feel this way. When it comes to sports, one of the things we love is seeing people who can do things that just no one else can. In different sports, you have those figureheads who are just the GOAT of all time. A lot of sports, you have that. Um, and, some say that Hakuho was that person. Certainly his record of championships, could make him the greatest of all time. At the very least, on a sort of a micro level, you want to have your best in the sport at any given moment. I think it really makes things special. You have your expected winner, and then you have the possibility of underdogs winning. You have to have your predicted favorite in order for the real excitement of an underdog win to mean something. And I think that's something that was kind of lacking in a lot of the tournaments in the last few years where Terunofuji was absent, that we didn't have our perennial favorite around, so there was just this general parity among the division. I'm sure there's people who are going to say that that's a good thing, and it is a good thing to an extent that other people are getting a chance, but I do think that on some level, a lot of us, what we crave is to see someone who is just so much better than the rest, and the Yokozuna is supposed to represent that, whether it's one person or several Yokozuna at the same time. One person made a really interesting comment that I have to give a lot of credence to. They said that this decision probably would not have been made if there were two active Yokozuna at the time that Hoshoryu won this Yusho, and that might be true. Obviously, the circumstances surrounding the decision matter, and that doesn't take away from Hoshoryu or his some of his incredible achievements and his consistency and his great performance on that final day. I just think that when we're asking these questions about what's the right decision here? Is this in line with the way they would have done the decision 20, 30 years ago? That's what we're talking about is if you isolate these performances in the last two, tournaments, would this same decision have been made in another context? And that's why when we brought up in the last video, Taka Keisho in a similar context did not get promoted twice. That's kind of what we're pointing to. But obviously, it was a different situation then. So, that certainly justifies it. The context matters. I just think we just wanted to be mindful of that, especially when we were in the speculation period. We didn't know the decision was going to be made within 12 hours.
At the end of the day, you don't necessarily need to be Asashoryu, his uncle, or Hakuho himself in order to be the ambassador for all of sumo. You just need those specific qualities that the Yokozuna Deliberation Council and the heads of the JSA itself want. Every sport needs a monster that the others are trying to slay, so to speak. In the NFL right now, it's the Kansas City Chiefs and the Swifties and all of those folks. In baseball, it is now the Los Angeles Dodgers and Shohei Ohtani. In the NBA, it used to be teams like the Lakers or the Michael Jordan Chicago Bulls. Every sport is better when there is somebody at the top for everybody to try to take down. And I think anointing Hoshoryu as that person right now is going to be great for the sport. And really, I don't think there's much of an argument to be made that there is anybody better than him at being that representative. Maybe Onosato, but he's too young. Maybe Takeru Fuji, but he had that injury. Maybe Aonishiki, but he's too young, and we'll talk about him a little bit later. But Hoshoryu is the best person in sumo right now, and the best person in sumo, with what he's done, deserves to be the Yokozuna.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that final point is really the key to all this, that there is no clear heir apparent that's any stronger of a case than Hoshoryu. A lot of the comments were making that point that who is it, if not Hoshoryu, that's going to suddenly take this mantle in the next couple months? Just because there isn't an obvious Hakuho waiting in the wings, and who knows if one of these guys eventually becomes that, that doesn't mean that Hoshoryu hasn't clearly cemented himself as superior to the rest. I mean, I think that consistency record, that's a really important factor here. When you see in comparison to Koto Zakura coming off of a Yusho and then going 5 and 10, I know injury is involved, but injury is also a big part of the sport. and your ability to fight through injury or just simply avoid them. It's not fair, so to speak, but that's just the way it works. To go 5 wins right out of getting the Yusho, that's a level of inconsistency that Hoshoryu does not display. So among the Ozeki.
In every sport, the most important ability is availability, and not just availability, but, the ability to be at your absolute best there. And, prior to like July of 2023, Kotozakura wasn't really there yet. Like his sumo really started to come on like at the end of 23, beginning of 24, but Hoshoryu's been more consistent for slightly longer. And I think this past Basho, whether it was injury or maybe it was just the unbearable pressure of being on his first rope run, it stopped Kotozakura from getting his own promotion, and now he's gonna have to have another tournament like he had at the end of last year, twice in a row if he wants to get there again. I think he can. I just don't know if he can do it this year. But now we do have to discuss what kind of Yokozuna we expect Hoshoryu to be. I mean, the dude is 25. Like he is only a few months older than Onosato, who just began his sumo career less than like 2 years ago. So at 25 years of age, he is the youngest Yokozuna promotion since Hakuho himself, who went on to be a Yokozuna for, I think it was 14 years and was like 37. So if Hoshoryu is able to compete, until he's like in his mid 30s, that's a solid 10-year run that Hoshoryu could have as a Yokozuna, barring any significant injuries. And, even some of like the maybe less impressive Yokozuna that we've had in the past decade or so, guys like Kakuryu or maybe Haruma Fuji, those were guys that you could count on to win about one tournament or so a year. So, it may seem like he's not quite ready to be a Yokozuna yet, simply because this was only his second U show ever. But a lot can happen over the course of just a single year in sumo. And, give him 5, 10 years with no injuries. Like, this is a guy that could surpass what Teruno Fuji did, by the time he's Teruno Fuji's age. So there's certainly a lot to look forward to as far as Hoshoryu's future prospects go.
Yeah, I think it's worth being mindful of the fact that, 2 Yusho in a couple of years' time doesn't sound like much, but at the age of 25, if he stays healthy, as he's done a relatively good job of until this point, I mean, if he's averaging about a U show a year for the next decade, then he's, surpassing some of the greatest Yokozuna in history. So, that's not to say it's going to happen like that, and who knows if he's going to accelerate his production from this point forward or vice versa. But I think that availability, that consistency, I think that's going to really factor in, and of course the age. So, I think he could be a really great one. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he is, but definitely it raises some interesting questions and the kinds of things that people were talking about a lot in the comments about what a Yokozuna should be and what kinds of level of performance they should be reaching. And typically, what people pointed to most was avoiding frequent losses to rank and filers in the Maegashira ranks, to be in contention for almost every tournament that they compete in, and to put up double-digit wins in pretty much every tournament that they compete in. Those are things that Hoshoryu has typically done, but not as strongly as some previous Yokozuna and not as strongly as some people around him, maybe. Those are some of the key claims that were being made in the comments about him. What do you think?
I mean, there are, of course, guys that you should expect a Yokozuna should always beat. Like Teruno Fuji, you expected that he would always, beat most of the rank and filers, guys like Tobizaru who beat him on the last day, or guys like Gonoyama, guys that are like the career rank and file who at best will maybe reach a Komusubi, someday soon or used to in the past. the fact, I'm going to use a little bit of an NBA meme. Get ready to learn Kinboshi, buddy, because I think we can very reasonably expect that Hoshoryu is going to be giving up anywhere from like one to two, sometimes three Kinboshi, per tournament, maybe up to like, 6 to 10 per year, if he competes that much. But I do also think that it gets a little bit overblown sometimes how many Kimboshi they give up. Like his mandatory fights are always going to be against the other Sanyaku, which is going to take up about half of his schedule. So the opportunities for him to lose to Maegashira guys are always going to be a little bit few and far between. But, and if he gets an injury, the great thing about being a Yokozuna, he can immediately leave and withdraw before giving up another, and just cite an injury like guys like Teruno Fuji did, like Kakoryu did, like like Haruma Fuji did back in the day. So I understand the concern that he's going to give up a lot of Kinboshi, and he probably will, at least until he really, really reaches his like physical peak, which I'm still not sure he's at yet. But I wouldn't be as concerned as people seem to be concerned right now.
Yeah, and I would certainly hope that he stays healthy. I think that's one of his, greatest assets is his health record. I would love to see him just keep that going, and it would be so nice, so refreshing to have our Yokozuna be someone who is perpetually around in every tournament. That's something that, having watched for the last several years, I've been really craving. So, I think he can do a great job of providing that energy that having a Yokozuna gives you. And then also one thing I want to just quickly address. There was a comment that might have been deleted at this point by the person who posted it. It was about how Hoshoryu's face makes it look like he thinks he's hot stuff and that he's overly conceited about himself. And I just wanted to, for anyone who's not familiar enough with Hoshoryu and his reputation and his out of the dohyo demeanor, he is notoriously one of the most laid back and silly of all the wrestlers. There are numerous videos of him messing around, joking around, dancing with his stablemates and with other Rikishi. He has a close friendship with Kirishima. They knew each other since before even flying out to Japan. He is known as really a person that almost every wrestler gets along with, but he does have this face that he puts on when he's fighting that's sort of notorious and very very serious. So he might come across one way, but actually the way he's known to be, if you're a little bit more familiar, is that he's a down to earth person, and certainly his fans seem to agree. There's a large cult surrounding Hoshoryu that I think is going to be really happy for him, and that know his personality a little bit better. So I just want to make that point for anyone who's even newer to sumo and not so familiar with that. There's a great video of him dancing around with, I believe, Wakamoto Haru. Highly recommend people find that on Reddit. It's a great one.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you want your Rikishi to just be all stoic all the time, I understand that is a sort of a key part of sumo itself. There are years upon years of videos of Taka Keisho being exactly that. And, he's great for that reason. Shodai is great. There's tons of Rikishi out there that will be exactly as stoic as you want them to be. And that's totally fine. But, that sort of, being hype and having sort of a game face, it just it may maybe it's a cultural difference, maybe it's just like an upbringing difference. Maybe it's just a factor of the people that he's been in sumo with. The Tatsunami stable that he's a part of isn't exactly, the ultra buttoned up one that Isagahama is. I mean, you can see the different YouTube channels of the Tatsunami Bea versus the Isagahama Bea and see that Isagahama, the stable for guys like Yokozuna Teruno Fuji, Atami Fuji, Midori Fuji, Takeru Fuji, and Haku Oho, those guys are just all business, all serious. Tatsunami is not. They love to laugh. They love to talk about what they're eating. They love to, fool around when they're in between practices. You know, sometimes it's nurture rather than nature. And over time, I think people will either, learn to love it or they will just learn to root for whoever is trying to take him on even harder. Well, one thing that we were completely remiss in talking about last time was the Juryo division. I mean, come on, where were our heads at in our last video for forgetting to talk about the second division entirely?
Probably in the headspace of are we or are we not going to have a new Yokozuna? I think we were a little distracted by all that, especially with the way the final day ended. But we definitely need to, now that we're having the second follow-up video, we need to talk about what an exciting tournament it was, and specifically a head-to-head between two huge figures, both, figuratively and literally in Shishi and Aonishiki, who were in a really heated battle the whole way through the tournament. They put up some exceptional performances and they fought each other on, was it the last day or the second to last day? And Shishi ended up winning the Juryo division. But they're both going to be promoted and they both look like really exciting wrestlers. Personally, I think I'm a little bit more excited for Aonishiki just because this is going to be his first time ever in the Makuuchi division. We did see Shishi in the last tournament, and he had a disappointing showing his first time up into Makuuchi. That doesn't mean that Shishi won't have a great tournament now, but I think that Aonishiki is providing something that we haven't seen before. His style is very unusual. He gets really low down to the ground. He does this like kind of like spearing at the torso style, really pushes forward his arms. And I think these two are just really excited up and coming wrestlers.
I mean, Shishi is somebody that, caught our eye very early. Like after Tochinoshin retired, we were kind of left without that truly fascinating Eastern European Rikishi. I mean, we did have Aoyama, but it was very clear that Aoyama's best years were well behind him, and he wound up retiring a couple of tournaments ago. Now he's working there, but it's been a very long time since we've had like a truly dominant sort of European or just non Japanese or Mongolian wrestler. So it just feels pretty exciting to see what a guy like Shishi or Onishiki did. And both of them seem to have they've both had very unique and different paths to actually getting to where they are, even though they're like literally next to each other on the Bansuke. Shishi had a very slow rise, didn't win any tournaments coming up the ranks, which is something that usually happens at even like the sixth or fifth division for guys that are, destined for either first or second division. And I think it's taken him like what 6 or 7 years before he made his Makuuchi debut. It's something like that. He was part of a stable that wasn't one of the bigger ones, the Ikazuchi stable. Like he's, I think, the first salaried wrestler that they've ever had. So he's just such a fascinating guy, but he has the build of someone that could be the next Tochinoshin, a guy that just can grab you, lift you up, and just gently place you outside of the dohyo. And yet that's not even his style. He's like a pure pusher, which makes him so fascinating to watch on a daily basis. And, he just had his best tournament, first ever U show. So, looking forward to seeing what he can do, now that he's had the experience of being in the Makuuchi division. And then we've got Onishiki, who has just been great from the jump. He is a Ukrainian refugee from the ongoing war in Ukraine, and he won his first 20 consecutive matches before tasting his first defeat. Won two lower division titles, and he just has not had a losing record. Every single time I or other people start to doubt this guy, he just puts in an even better performance than the last time. It doesn't even matter that he's only like 250 pounds, like a solid like 50 to 100 pounds less than a lot of these other guys that he's going up against. 180 centimeters isn't all that tall either. That's only like about 5'8", 9, or 10. Like this is a guy that looks like he should not be as good as he is, but he is just this darn good. And here is the craziest thing about him. It has taken him exactly 10 tournaments to get into Makuuchi. Takeru Fuji, who was the absolute king of last year, it only took him 9. So this is a guy that is on pace to be, almost as good as a guy that we all think is going to be, the next big thing. So really somebody that I cannot wait to see him, with the big lights on in March.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we're not getting into our previews. I also know that I need to break the habit of saying absolutely every time I chime in on this podcast. Um, but I think that if we were to start making our Kachi Clash predictions for the March tournament, I think this would probably be my bona fide pick for who I think is going to have a huge run in the bottom of the division. His style is very unlike other wrestlers in the division. They haven't fought him yet. Anyone who hasn't fought him yet, you need to experience it. I would imagine to be prepared for it, which is something that we've seen a lot from new entries to the Makuuchi division. I think he's going to do very, very well in the next tournament. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's in the Yusho hunt, at least in the kind of the early stages. Whether or not he wins it, that's another question that we could get into as it gets closer. Maybe he'll be
You
competing
know,
with our new Yokozuna.
we've yet to see what it looks like when Onishiki is struggling to get his Kachikoshi. Maybe it'll happen his first time in the Makuuchi division, or maybe he really is the next Tochinoshin, and even if he's not right now, he's only 20 years old. He's going to be the youngest guy in the first division next tournament. So even if next tournament isn't, his time to start his climb, he's got plenty of time in order to, get to that really good sumo.
Well, again, I just want to thank everybody for getting so involved with the channel. It's been really exciting for us as we're growing things. We want to make sure that we're putting out content that you're interested in. So get involved, comment on the video, make sure to subscribe so that you're hearing about the latest videos we have, and let us know what else you want to see us talk more about, which topics interest you the most. We also want to hear your thoughts on Hoshoryu and his promotion and what you're thinking is going to happen in the next few tournaments. How do you feel about Aonishiki and Shishi coming back up? And anything else that's on your mind about sumo. But we really appreciate you all getting involved. Like the video, subscribe, and we'll be back again soon to talk some more sumo.
Take care, everybody. See you next time.
Every champion you'll meet, ring the gong, it's time to learn. Sumo tales at every turn. New to Sumo Podcast Fun.